Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take On. In this podcast, we look at customer success and issues related to it and how to be bold in growing your customer success program and practices. My name is Jason Whitehead. I'm one of your co-hosts coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Great place to be these days. And I'm here with my other co-host, Jason Noble. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason. Good evening. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jason Noble here in the UK. So welcome, everybody. Really excited about this.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be talking about how to speak your customer's language. And this is a topic that I think doesn't get enough attention, and people seem to think that either they instinctively do it or they come to us and say, we just can't get our teams to speak to our customers in a way that's resonating, in a way that's working. How do we do this? So we're going to dig in a little bit and see what's behind this topic and how we go. But before we jump in, we always like to start with a bold challenge question. So the question we're going to lead with today for you to be thinking about is, what bold actions can you take to change the way you engage your customers to ensure you're speaking their language? So let's get started with that. Okay, so let's jump in. Jason, why are we talking about this?
I think this is such a key question. I really love it because the thing is, all of our different elements to this, our customers are each individuals. They've got their own way that they speak and they look after their specific areas of business, but they've also got their own industries. They've got their own challenges. So it becomes a really big challenge for us to speak to all of the different customers. You almost have to change it every time you speak to them. And I think it's a really difficult thing to do. And I think what we're ultimately trying to do is establish strong, trusted relationships where we can really be effective in influencing our customers to take actions that can increase their own success. And it's those relationships that it's critical to make sure you are speaking to them in their language for. And this is, I think, a really key component of this is being able to reach them where they are. How do you know the challenges your customers have got? How do you know what they're doing there and then? You need to quickly learn how to engage with them in a way that earns trust, and you can influence them to make them successful, to make them help them make the right decisions. And I think many people, this isn't just customer success or CSMs, struggle to have effective conversations with customers, with prospects, key stakeholders, with internal staff, or with partners. And we all need to learn the skills, how we can listen and learn better to understand the customer's language, and then use this language to engage with them and help them get what they need and want. And I think it is something that's often overlooked. People don't put any thought into it. It really can be a challenge.
I remember early in my career, I'd come in and just out of graduate school and trying to figure out what I was doing, where I was going. And I would just watch some of the other people, because I was in a consulting organization, and watch them engage with customers. Like, wow, this person's really good. And just watch the way a customer would react, and their Pied Piper, they bring them along. And then I'd go into other meetings and you could just read the body language. You could just read the tone in the room where you're like, this person just needs to shut the hell up. I mean, just what are they doing here?
I think a lot of it's listening as well, isn't it? And I think that's a skill that's often overlooked. But it's by us listening that you can pay more attention, can actually speak better to your customers.
Absolutely. And I find a lot of people, like when we go into a coaching or a training session, especially the junior people early in their career, they're like, okay, I get that I need to do this, but I'm not sure how to do that. What do these effective conversations look like? And then when you model that for you, like, oh, wow. I'm like, yeah, you're just picking right up on it. So
It is difficult to get. I think people don't spend the time focusing on it or saying, how do we do this? Let me ask the next question back to you, Jason. I've talked about the why, but what do we mean by it? What is the customer's language? How do you relate and connect with the individual versus, and I mentioned this, the individual versus their own language, their own tones, versus industry versus domain versus technology? What do we mean by customer language?
yeah, this is one of those that I think applies on multiple levels. So there's no one single answer. So I think there is the whole piece of how do you come in and connect with the individual or with that group of people? And as a consultant or a salesperson or CSM, you're often called upon to work with people in all different industries. So it's not just about the industry language, but you really need to be able to get to feel what language is going to resonate with these people. Am I using the right words and phrases? Are they listening to me? Or are they shutting down? This person doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. And I think there's also the other side is, since you do have to quickly go into an industry, you as an outsider will never be an expert in someone else's industry in 10 minutes or even a week. If someone's been there 30 years, you're just not going to get there. But there was a lot that you can do to learn the basics of the industry and show that you've done enough research to understand the major issues or the complexities. And even just being able to go through and parrot back some of their words to them in the right context to show you're listening and you're understanding, that goes a long way. I think also looking at how do you build trust and rapport and with an individual or with a small team, that's pretty huge too. And that's a big piece.
I think that's really challenging, isn't it? Because you've got to build that trust and rapport at an individual level, at a team level, but also at a business level. You want to be that trusted advisor. We all do. We want customers to see us as the thought leaders they need. And it's doing it at different levels and doing it as effectively as you can at different levels.
And I think it is a skill. There's techniques you can learn around that as well too. For example, in some of my educational background, learned a lot about Myers-Briggs and group dynamics and conflict management and those things. But really looking at even just from a very simple personality perspective, listening to how someone talks when they're speaking to you. Are they using hard facts and numbers and science? Are they looking at visuals and show me the numbers behind this? Or are they talking more that we want our customer to feel happy, we want them to feel they had a great experience, to be excited when they come and see us? But they're talking more of those feeling things, even just those basic levels. You can calibrate against that, and you can even tweak up in the same conversation in a group. Work in both language when you're addressing the right person, just to make sure you're covering the bases there. I think so few people, they get into the piece of speaking their language that they're not really being conscious about that. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of folks.
I think there is so much you can learn from this, and it's the art of speaking in public, isn't it? And having challenging conversations. But there are so many things you can learn just seeing other people do it, observing other people, observing your colleagues, kind of other your peers in your organization.
So let me ask you from your perspective then, as customer success professionals, where especially if you're, working in a software company that sells into all sorts of industries, like a CRM company, they're all over the place. Do you think that you need to be an industry expert for our customers, or that your customers want you to be? And how do you handle that?
This is such a great question. I know a lot of job seekers, when they're looking for new roles in customer success, it's a question that comes up. Where do you put the balance between industry expertise versus domain expertise as a customer success professional? And I think if you're an organization that's got a relatively small number of customers across specific industries, you could learn that industry quite well. But to your point, you're never going to be the same as someone that's got 30 years experience, unless that's your own background. I think the big challenge comes when you deal with multiple customers across different industries or even across the same industry, but they've got subtle differences. And it then becomes really difficult to do. I'd almost say it's almost impossible to be an industry expert across every industry that your customers deal with. But what you do need to do is show that you've got a basic understanding of the challenges, of what's happening in there, of the opportunities, of what makes that industry successful, and really that you've done the basic research at the very least to understand the key issues in the industry. But I think you do need to be an expert in your own domain. And for us, the domain is customer success, change management, user adoption. These are all things that are part of it. And you need to be an expert in that and to help your customer understand that. And you really need to be able to prove your expertise quickly there and then demonstrate to the customer that you're going to work with them to help them learn how you can apply that specific domain industry expertise to their expertise in their industry to help them get the outcomes they want and overcome the challenges. And I think that's the balance that's actually hard to get right. It's that balance between how much do I need to understand the industry versus what I'm doing and what value I'm adding for my customers. And I think the balance really needs to be more for us to our domain to be able to advise customers how we can help add value for them and ultimately make them successful. But any other thoughts you'd have on that?
Yeah, I agree 100%, especially with the own your domain knowledge and expertise. Having worked in a consulting background on multiple occasions, you're thrown into the wild where you get the call and says, oh, you need to be this new client site tomorrow. And you'll know nothing about them. They'll know nothing about you, but you were told to show up. So you roll in. And one of the things that I learned is that if you can go in and confidently present your expertise, and you can really build your credibility even without their industry knowledge. You see them, look, I'm new to this industry, but I've worked in these other places that are related, so I have a sense of it. But here's where I'm strong, where you need my help. And together we're going to figure out how to make it right for you. And I'm not only am I an expert in my domain, but I'm really good at helping you figure out how we tweak this for your industry. So I'm going to pull out from you what's relevant to make you successful applying what I know. And when you do that, people, it'll resonate with them. It's okay. This person brings in something I don't have, and that's what they want. Otherwise, you're wasting their time. So
I think you're exactly right. This is what our customers want from us. Let me ask the next question back to you then, Jason. This is one that I think is very related to that. How do we know what we need to know about our customers in order to speak so that in a way that really resonates with them? So how do we take that domain expertise and what we do know about their industry to really start adding value for them and help drive outcomes for them?
Yeah. I think one of the most important things is to really cultivate the skill to know what's important for them. And I see a lot of people roll in and they want to just garbage dump around this is what I know and this is how great I know it and where you want to be. But if you completely miss the mark, you've wasted their time and you're not speaking their language and you've blown a great chance to really have that trust and credibility. So I think part of that is really laying out what's going to resonate with them. How do I speak in a way that they listen to, but also what's really driving the behaviors or concern? What's behind this? And so many times with customers or even, working internally, it's like, what's behind this issue? So asking them, they'll say, here's an issue, but here's what we need to do. I'm like, okay, help me understand what's the driver behind this. Why is this an issue? Why is this so important? What happens if we don't get this resolved? What happens if we do get it resolved? What are the other factors we need to consider? And then sort of what's success look like from you when we get done fixing this problem? Where does that need to look like? And also, as we mentioned above, what are the facts? Do they want facts and figures? Do they want an experience? Do they care more about people? And then tie in both what's important to them, understand what's going on behind them, so you can really get to the heart of it. And so I think both demonstrating that what they're driving about and what they're concerned about, and what's going to make them successful, and then using the words and actual language and expressions and visuals, if they're visual learners or whatever it needs to be, to connect that message through. I think that's pretty key. What about you? What else would you add to this?
I think you've hit on some really key points there. And I think the thing is you've really, as you said, we don't have to be an industry expert, but you've got to understand what their challenges are and what they're looking for from you and how you can add value. And I think a lot of it actually comes from that very first engagement that we've had with our customers. Why have they come to us as a provider? What are the challenges we're solving for them?
Mhm.
And I think that really helps improve those relationships. If you really, what makes them successful? How can we help them? What value do we add for them? What are they trying to do? You're already being empathetic to them. You're already understanding their situation. I think that really is critical. So for me, it's about understanding your customers from the very first engagement with you and through the whole customer journey. So not just us in customer success dealing with the post sales, if you want to call it that, but that first engagement when we first speak to them as a prospect, how are we making sure that we're understanding those problems and challenges and the outcomes they're looking for? And how do we make sure the rest of our business understand that as well?
Yeah, and I think that's really important too, because especially when you get folks who might not be intuitive or naturally empathetic, and not to fall into stereotype too much, but there is the perception of hardcore coders or techie folks that really are excited about the technology itself. When you help train them to learn to listen, speak to the customers and start to understand it from the customer's point of view, it's almost like a light bulb goes on. I've worked closely with a lot of IT teams, and it's always great when you ask the right question, have them say, whoa, you just blew my mind. I never thought to ask that question. Or I've never looked at it this way. This makes so much more sense. It's such a great thing. But with that as a backtrack, let me ask you, Jason, how do you go about learning more about your customers and their industry and trying to figure out what's going to resonate?
I think one of the key things here is you've got to be able and want to do research. You've got to want and have that excitement to understand what's going on. You've got to listen a lot to conversations at your customer. And probably spend more time listening but learn from your customers. Your customers are the industry experts, and learn from them. Ask them the right questions so they can teach you how to talk to them. They can teach you some of the challenges. But I think in the way you question as well, ask open-ended, even ambiguous questions and listen beyond what they actually saying. How are they interpreting the question? What language and what pronunciation, what tones they're using when answering it? You can really understand what excites them, what really annoys them, what's the essence of what they're trying to do. And I think if they ask for clarification on an ambiguous question that you ask them, try to get them to interpret it however they want. Think about a question which will tell you a lot about what's going on, about how you reach them going forward. And really watch and observe. And I think we can do this with Teams, with Zoom. You can see the tones, the intonation your customers have got, and you can learn so much about them. And I think that's really the important thing to do. And I think what you really want to do though is it's those open-ended questions. And I think there is so much It's not just asking customer, do you want this? There's always a lot of discussions about customers don't want features or pushing back on feature, but try and understand the why behind it. And keep asking the why do you want this? What is this trying to do? What's the value this is bringing? And I think that's really important. So don't be afraid to go really deep with some of these conversations. Anything that you'd add on that?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. I remember off topic, but years ago when I was back in the college days and beyond, and you meet someone, and inevitably you'd find someone who was whinging on about they were looking to date a certain type of person way before all this get married. So one of the questions I used to ask people was, "What's your ideal partner look like?" Or "What's your ideal partner?" Just leave it like that. And I didn't really care what the answer was, but I was always interested to see if they talked about funny, smart, this, that, whatever, or successful or professional or whatever, or physical traits, what they look like and how they carry themselves, just to get a sense of where is this person on their path and what is it that they're really looking for. Cause that really taught me how to engage with them on a level that'd be meaningful to them. And they could ask appropriate follow-up questions, but it's always just fascinating to see people would usually fall into one bucket of the personality type trait or the physical type traits. And I found that one's fascinating. So I try to find ways to ask a similar type question in the business environment. What is that question that people can interpret any different direction that's going to give you insight to them? And I don't know if you ever saw one of the movie I saw a long time ago I really enjoyed was the movie Maverick, and had Mel Gibson that as a player in the Great Western. And I love there was one scene in there early on where he's in a saloon and he's getting into a poker game with some guys who are all a bunch of roughnecks. And he said, "Look, I promised to lose for the first hour." So he did. And he went in and he lost all kinds of stuff. He played all the way through. And then the hour was up and he looks at his pocket watch and he goes, and then suddenly he starts winning. He cleans their clock and they get all kinds of upset. But he's like, "For the first hour, you were teaching me how to play. You were giving me all of your tells."
Yeah.
And I think there's so much about asking these questions in a way where, I've talked with customers about this and train them, like, you ask the question so your customer will train you on how to engage with them.
Yeah.
And they're giving you their tells. They're telling you what's important. They're teaching you how to engage with them. You just have to ask the right questions and listen. And I think that's such an important thing for people to be doing, that sometimes people get so excited about, I've got 30 minutes on the clock and I've got to get all this information out. They forget to listen.
I think that's such an important thing. And it is that listening really allows our customers to open up and to really understand what's the essence of what they're doing. And
Yeah.
I think the other key thing here is that this takes time. This is all about building these relationships. You can't do this in 5 minutes. I think you've got to want to invest that time in it as well.
Yeah.
Listen, Jason, so there's a lot of talk, and we said earlier on about the idea of a trusted advisor in customer success. What does this really mean, and how does the way we communicate impact this?
Wow. And I love the trusted advisor term, and I hate the trusted advisor term because it gets around so much.
Absolutely.
I think really, for me, when you talk about trusted advisor, you want that customer, to value your input and to think of it that what you're bringing in is so new and significant and of so much value to them that they're going to take a leap of faith and do what you ask and say, because they believe that more than they do about this, and you have something to offer that's going to make them more successful than they can be on their own. So they follow. And I trust is all about relationships. And when you speak the customer's language, whether it's the industry piece to a degree or your domain knowledge, whatever it needs to be, but you also speak in the words and symbolism and imagery that's going to resonate with them, that builds trust. And then getting them to feel that you've heard them and that you understand where they're coming from and where they're trying to go and what's getting in their way. When they believe that you understand that builds trust. And I think when we use the customer's language, we're constantly feeding that and it grows. And if we're not using language, they feel misunderstood or they feel unheard or they get frustrated. Or what I've also seen a lot is this person may be perfectly nice, but I don't believe a word they say, or I don't have faith that their advice is going to make me better off than me doing my own thing, because they just don't get the whole thing. So they stop showing up to meetings where they don't take the actions that they agree to, where they don't agree to actions. And that's a real sign that either they don't trust you, you don't have the expertise, or you're not building trust in a way that's going to make the difference. But that's my take. What about you? What do you see as the connection?
I agree with you, the initial way you described that. It is a term that I think can be used wrong. I think it has a lot of value in it, but does it mean anything to our customers? Because what are we advising them on? And that goes back to this industry expert versus domain expert. And ultimately what we're trying to do is help them be successful. So as long as we can advise them on that part of it and how we can help them be more successful, I think that's where the essence of this is. It's about how do we help them successful? If they can look to trust what we're saying and how to use our services, our tools, our technology, then I think it really works. But I think you've got to get it right. I think not, it can be used the wrong way. And you've really got to find out what it means for you and your customers. And I think that's the challenge.
Right. So let me ask you this too. When you're engaging with a customer and you're trying to speak their language and get them to trust you, and then you're trying to listen actively and do all this great stuff, how do you recognize when you're actually speaking their language and that you're on track? Or how do you recognize that I'm missing the boat here? I've got to recalibrate in real time. And frankly, as the CSM, it is your job to meet them where they are. It's not their job to meet you. So you've got to be the one to adjust if you're missing.
Great question. And again, I think this is something that's quite hard to do. But I think what you've got to do, to that example you gave about the movie and Mel Gibson, it's that watch and learn, listen and learn, spend the time up front doing that. And this is why I said about using Teams and Zoom. You can understand people a lot better. You can see their body language. You can see what they're doing, what they're looking, and you can understand people from that. And I think you've also got to really spend that time showing these customers that you're listening, that you understand their concerns, but also that you're going to do something with it. We're not just there listening, it's going in one ear and out the other. They want you to either take it and come back to them with what they've asked for, or push back at the right point. I think it's important to get that balance, but you've got to be able to show that you're listening and understand where they're coming from, what their challenges are, and acknowledge this. Replay back what they've heard you say, or what you've heard them say. I think the key is as well, if we use language where the customer is constantly feeling unheard, misunderstood, or if we're pushing back all the time, we're saying no at the wrong points all the time, they will get frustrated. And I think they'll feel that ultimately we don't truly understand their needs, their challenges, what they're looking for. And the knock-on effect of that is that they then don't follow our advice. They don't take the actions we're looking them to take to help them be successful. And if they believe that we're not credible in what we're talking about, it causes a real problem. They want us to understand the problem. Until we can understand what they're saying, they really, that trust isn't there. And I think for me, it is that you've got to spend the time listening to your customers, listening to multiple stakeholders there, taking notes, make sure you're keeping records of what goes on, what do they like, what don't they like. I think these are really important things to do. And so often people don't, and people just forget about it. And I think it's really important to make sure you're investing that time. Anything that you'd add on top?
No, I think you covered it all. I remember a couple of experiences where I've been facilitating some client groups. And one of my favorite things, I love to go in with a small group of clients and you do a half day, full day facilitation, because you really get to know the group and the organization and their needs. It's really just a rush for me. But I remember about partway through, they would actually verbally just say, wow, you really get us. Wow, you really understand our business, which was great to hear. I'd never worked in that industry before in my life. I was asking questions and parroting back their terminology and their words at the right time to show that I was listening. And that's all it took. So I thought that another thing that has been helpful with just the twofer is the asking those open-ended questions, but as you're asking the follow-up questions, doing two things with. One is using their language and asking questions that incorporate their language work pretty well. And then phrasing the questions in a way that gets them to a new aha moment where you haven't said anything, you haven't told them, but you've asked them a question where they get it and they've said, that's a really good question, or I haven't thought of that before. That's usually a good sign that they're believing what you're saying, they're giving you credibility for what you're saying. So when you get those really good questions, good aha moments, that's a great one.
I like the aha moment. It's so important as well. That is, I think when you get that, and it's challenging to get there, but it really does have a big impact, I think, on your customer, on you, and it lets you know that you've done the right thing. What you see when your customers get to that point as well is a really powerful statement that they'll then go tell other people. This is when advocacy really kicks in.
Oh yeah. And I think with those aha moments, like questions are so powerful. And I think the right question phrased the right way at the right time, the right person, they'll gnaw on that for days or weeks or sometimes years afterwards. Like someone asked me this question once. I'm sure we've all been to like a conference or someone presenting, like, I was in a meeting one time and sharing their story and someone asked me this question. And because of this, blah, blah, blah. Being the person who asked the question the first time is immensely powerful and great. And I've yet to see any PowerPoint slide deck in the world that has changed my life or that I've remembered beyond anything else. Maybe the occasional meme image or something like that. Those go so far, but a question will stick with you for years. So I encourage that. But then to round us out, this we've talked about the need to build trust and speak their language and to really feel with the customer present in a way that's meaningful to them. How do you scale this? And you don't always have customers in one industry and you might be all over. Really, how do you bring this out to the masses?
This is so important as well. We did an episode on scaling not too long ago, and how do you scale what you're doing in customer success? And there isn't an easy answer to this, but I think it's something that every business needs to go through. You go from that kind of small startup stage, you go to scale up, you get more customers. And I think what you've got to do is get that balance between domain expertise and industry expertise. And as we said earlier on, focus on the domain expertise, your domain expertise, and how you can deliver that value for the customer. And I think that is so important to do that. I think by talking to different stakeholders at your customer, you'll get a better understanding of processes. What pieces of your engagement can you automate? Where can you bring in technology to help you there? They don't all have to be conversations. And I think the other thing you can start doing is put together some case studies for how you've been successful with customers, get your customers to help with this advocacy, get them to work on advocacy for you, but put together examples then of how these same concepts can apply in other industries for other customers.
Yeah.
And I think having your customers tell the story, your customers want to tell the story. They want to take part in white papers, in interviews. But when you hear it from their point of view, that really resonates both with our teams, it resonates with the market, with other customers. And I think what you can also start doing is, if you grow to a certain point, do you actually bring around a different structure on your team where you introduce an organizational structure where some of your team do focus on key industry verticals? If you've got enough people, if you've got the scale, you can do that. So there may be a need to offer some level of specialism. And then what you can do is you put a subject matter expert, an industry expert in your team there, either on the customer success team or from elsewhere in the business, but you can have someone that comes and helps there. And you can also rotate people out those teams. So I think to continue to help build up your customers' knowledge, or your knowledge of your customers, and your knowledge of the different industries, is rotate around the different verticals. Any other things that you've seen that can help with the scaling, Joyce?
I like that, everything you said, especially the balanced domain thing. I think the other piece too, and sort of what you saying, rotate people through, is depending on the customer size and engagement, and how do you bring in people who have the domain expertise, plus maybe someone else has the industry expertise? How do you pair that up a little bit? And how do you come in and say, this is why we brought this in as a team, and here's how we're going to help you as a team? Now, that's not always appropriate, but I've been on the buyer side, like sales would do that quite a bit when I was at Texas Instruments or other large companies where someone was coming to sell to us. They would bring in someone who's the product expert. They'd bring someone who's the implementation expert. They'd bring in the other domain expert or just worked in that industry to show their credibility. And it worked. It was very effective to show I as an individual may not have everything you need, but I can bring in access to those resources, or I can learn what I need to do pretty quickly. I do think, to your point though, if you're in a digital touch engagement situation, because I don't look at moving off of a low touch, more of a digital engagement strategy, it is hard to show that you're speaking their language when you only have one industry, but trying to figure out what that needs to look like and maybe changing some of your digital touch based on industry specific pieces, that's possible. Incredible.
I think this is such an important topic. I think you've got to look at how you do this as you're onboarding new customers, onboarding new team members. How do you get this right? You've got a new customer that's in a different industry. How do you speak to them? And you set up the front for it takes investment up front to take that time to speak to them. How do you make sure you're training your own team to do this? And it's such an important topic.
Yeah.
Go, sorry.
About in a couple other episodes too, we had some guests on. Part of making your customer successful is building out their domain expertise. So for example, if they're implementing technology around privacy or digital security or things like that, many of the people who may be your customers, this may be their first time working in those realms. They may not have the in-depth expertise. So you've got to figure out how to speak both their industry language, but also teach them a new language that they need to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's another wrinkle that we can explore another time, but it is something to think about. How do you meet your customer where they are, establish trust and credibility, but then also develop their language skills in the deep domain where they may need it.
I think that meet your customer where they are is the key thing, what we're trying to do here. And this is, how do we provide what our customers need and what they come to us for? I mean, Jace, this is such a cool topic, this, and I think we've already got some ideas about future conversations and with some other guests and things, but let me, guys, thank you for listening. As Jason said at the beginning, we like to leave you with a kind of a bold challenge question. I won today. is what bold actions can you take to change the way that you engage with your customers to ensure that you're speaking their language? So have a think. We'd love to know your thoughts on this. But as usual, thank you very much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this session, and we look forward to doing another one of these in a couple of weeks with some really cool guests coming up.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Bye now.